Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Hello, and welcome to this video/audio edition of the StoryPod podcast, brought to you by Creative BFF. Okay, my name is Ashley. If this is your first time here, welcome. Now we're best friends. You have no choice. No, I won't force you to be my friend, but I hope that by the end of this, you will want to be my best friend, okay? Because I want to be your best friend. I want to help you with your stories, all right? Let's do the doing of story together. Is that cheesy? Can you guys help me come up with a better little tagline? Because I couldn't think of anything else. It's like we just do story stuff here, okay? We don't necessarily break down, the theory of story, but we just do it because the doing is fun. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, reeling it all the way back in. Okay. What we're doing today is one of my favorite things to do. Now, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, which I doubt that you have, but if you've listened to any of my podcast episodes, you know that one of my favorite things to do is to answer story questions. Girl, listen. I just realized I'm looking all over the place. I'm probably not even looking at you right now. Please forgive me. My eyes float. They bounce. So please forgive me if at any time I'm not looking at you in your beautiful face, but know that my heart is there. Okay. The eyes of my heart are looking at your beautiful, handsome face. But in any case, the eyes in my face, the eyes on my body are bouncing around. So anyway, okay, we're going to be answering a question. Now, because at the time of the recording, nobody knows that I exist. Okay, so I have to go to Reddit to find questions. But if you have a story question that you would like me to answer on the podcast, I would love to. Do you know how happy that would make me? I would absolutely love to do that. So in order to send me your question, please send me an email to ash@creativebff.com, or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, to the contact page, and you can fill out the little contact form there. Please make sure on either option to put that you have a story question so I do not delete your email, because girl, the spam be getting me. Okay. So anyway, we are answering a question from a Reddit subreddit, which I don't know which one it was. It was a writing subreddit, a character subreddit, because a pop-up is covering the name of the Reddit. Okay. The subreddit, but the author is the Wallflower. Now their question is, help, the Chocomancer. That's pretty much all I've got so far. He does magic with chocolate. He can conjure chocolate, including variations. Essentially, he can pretty much make any candy bar there is. He was employed by the king, but his employment became more like a prison and he escaped. I'm trying to figure out a story for him. What kind of adventures can he go on? What conflicts might he have? What is a lie/misbelief he might have? Now listen, I read the question a couple of times. I had a thought about a lie misbelief, a very easy one, maybe like a softball lie misbelief that he could have. And then I started recording. Okay, listen. So we're kind of going to be thinking through this together as we do. Also, you may be sitting here with me for a few minutes because I am probably not going to be doing a lot of editing, a lot of video editing until such time as I have the funds to hire an editor. So you're getting it raw. All right. We're doing this raw right now. So working backwards. So if my eyes shift, I'm looking at the question because it helps me to reread the question, so I'll be doing that. Please forgive me. In terms of a lie or a misbelief he might have. Now, of course, a lot is going to really depend on the world building. And I say that a lot. It's going to depend on the world building. It's going to depend on the tone of the story. But since he's a Chocomancer, it kind of is lending itself to more of a cozy fantasy, which is a genre that I'm just discovering. And I kind of love it. I love it. So it's going to be probably more cozy, more fun. It may be a little more difficult to do something with a darker tone with a Chocomancer, someone who manipulates chocolate, but you can do it. You can do it, and that could be very, very cool. That could be a fun challenge to do. But the path of least resistance would probably be a cozy, humorous type of story. So that's also gonna, what you come up with for this character is gonna depend on the world that he's in, right? So a really easy lie or misbelief that he can have is that his ability doesn't matter. His powers don't matter. They don't really help anybody. Because we could have him in a world where there are people who have real, like, earth-shaking, world-changing types of magic, right? So people who can actually, like, raise people from the dead, resurrection, people who can heal, just like maybe like the typical types of abilities that you would see in an RPG or in a fantasy story. So you could have him in that kind of world. And so he could be of a class of magic users that are relegated. Okay, here we go. Okay, so like it's starting to pop. So we're doing this live, okay? Semi-live, as I say sometimes. But he could be of a class of magic users that are perhaps above those who can't use magic at all, but below those who have magics that are more highly valued, that maybe do more damage, that can be used in war to protect high-ranking people, that kind of stuff, that can be used to bring in money, that can be used to entertain, whatever kinds of categories of magic users you want to set up. But he could be in a service class of magic user, and even within the service class of magic user, he could be like in a sub class of the service class of magic users. So for example, I'm thinking like, okay, you have a class of people that, perhaps would be employed at the estate of a duke or an earl or a high-ranking noble, and they can afford to hire magic users as the live-in staff. And so maybe you have housekeepers and butlers who have very crucial to the running of a house type of magic. Maybe, I don't know if you would have like control type magics and things like that. And then you maybe would have a cook who's able to imbue the food with certain properties, healing properties, so there are multiple specialties that you can go into and you can combine them. So if you think like an RPG type of thing, where if you can combine certain skills, certain magics together to enhance each other, if you're in a particular, excuse me, rude mucus. But anyway, so if you're a cook who is able to use magic, perhaps you can either make the food intensely palatable, you can make it more healthful, to really bring like health, I just use the word, to whoever's eating it. You can have it have like, what is it called? Aphrodisiac properties. You can have it, whatever. I'm not going to go 85 years down this path, come up with ideas. I'm sure you can come up with more ideas of what a magic user could do. But then the chocolate mancer, someone who can only really work with a specific ingredient, might just be the assistant to a pastry chef. Maybe some would have their own shop, so that could even be a thing. If you want to go the cozy route, if you're not sending the character on an adventure, it could be about him going to another land and starting a new life and opening a chocolate shop and learning new abilities that can enhance his chocolate, or making relationships with people, kind of putting his crew together, as though it's like an RPG. I love playing RPG video games, role-playing video games. So my mind often goes into those normal structures, the structures that are normal to RPGs. But, as you're gathering your group of adventurers, what is it called? Why can't I think of words? But like whatever, the crew that you adventure with, your party. Got it. Your party. As he's gathering his party, perhaps they can help enhance. Maybe he gathers a party and it's like, what we're going to do is we are going to create the premier, experience, dining experience, and this is also going to depend on, is this a world that is supposed to be like from the past? So it is kind of like that traditional fantasy castles and armor and, kings and queens and all that kind of stuff. Or is this a more modern fantasy? That's going to also determine the goal. The goal, may not necessarily be to slay a dragon, but that could also be really cool. How, and this will be a complication, how would a Chocomancer save the world? Come on, that's kind of interesting. But continuing on the cozy path, it could be him, setting up a new life, finding people to do that life with, overcoming this lie/misbelief that he has, that his ability, his power is useless. It doesn't really serve anything. Perhaps that's something that was ingrained in him when he was a kid. Maybe he has, kind of like the easy places to go for this type of wound and conflict and lie, stem back from childhood. Maybe his father or his mother was a very powerful magic user. And when his magic manifested, it was chocolate. And here's the thing. Okay, listen, you could even get down, if you want him to have a more offensive/defensive action-y way to use chocolate, you may need to think, do some research on the molecular structure of chocolate. Do some research on chocolate beans, cocoa beans. Where does it come from? And then it could even push into, okay, how far can we bend his chocomancy? Can we make it almost like he's like an earthbender? Once we maximally power him up, can he bend certain types of seed? So he could be like shooting pellets or whatever. I don't know. Thinking about the makeup of chocolate. What are the components of chocolate? What is he and this kind of line of thinking that I'm going might kind of be more like science fantasy, when we're thinking about, okay, what are the components that make up chocolate? What is he actually controlling when he's controlling the chocolate? Is he controlling the liquid? And I think it's going to also, he can conjure. Okay, I'm going to have to look back at the question. He can conjure chocolate, including variations. I don't know what that means. So it says he can pretty much make any candy bar there is. So he's kind of like the Willy Wonka. So maybe he has like a Willy Wonka type of, he makes an amazing chocolate factory and he becomes the richest Chocomancer in the land, and he makes all his bros and his friends rich too, along with it. I don't know if riches is what he wants or powerful or makes it great. And maybe that's not his goal, maybe to become the richest, the most well known, but perhaps one of the needs that he can be fulfilling is the need for self-actualization. The need to realize his own worth, realize the value of his ability. And as he's going on that journey, he's helping other kind of misfits recognize the value. And that could be really, really fun. Like if you bring a bunch of other misfits, other kind of useless conjurers and magic users in the world together, people that were cast-offs and the underdog and all that kind of stuff, and you bring them together and you find a way for them to enhance each other and to make each other stronger and to become basically an unbeatable team in whatever world that you are building. Those are always, at least for me, you let me know, bestie, if these are stories that are interesting to you. I love a good underdog story. I love to see people who have been counted out kind of rise to the occasion, even if they've been counting themselves out, and then being able to see how they solve conflicts, being able to see how they kind of become the best. There's something about that I think speaks to me and to a lot of other people probably, where we're able to see someone who we can relate to in whatever way. Because most of us are not rich and powerful or strong or whatever the case may be in some way or another. We all kind of feel our weaknesses, and some of us very strongly. And so when we can see a character who is similarly weak or similarly undervalued or counted out and all that kind of stuff, and seeing them become something great in their specific area, not having to proverbially, I don't know if I use that correctly, put on armor that's too big for them, right? Like David and Goliath and Saul's armor, when he was trying to put that armor on him, he's like, this is too big. I just got to be me, finding a way for him or them and them, him and them to be successful at being who they are and making a way in the world is a very satisfying story. So I'm looking at the question again. And I mean, like, if the being employed by the king, so it may or may not work because he was employed by the king, but his employment became more like a prison and he escaped. So there is some value there. Like, if he was a good enough Chocomancer to the point where the king is kind of like imprisoning him to a certain extent, maybe not in name, but in deed, there is some value there, but of course that value would depend on what the king values, right? Sorry, I was just making sure that I was actually recording. But yeah, so if you want to go the cozy fantasy route, which is always fun, it's always nice, I would probably look at potentially him setting up his own shop, like escaping the nation, the country, or whatever that he was from, if it needs to go that far. Along the way, finding a party of similarly misfitty type of adventurers and them banding together in friendship and trust and all that kind of stuff, and maybe some conflict too, to create something for themselves that perhaps becomes world renowned. I think that could be a fun story. If you want to go a more traditional fantasy kind of with a little bit of a darker tone, that could be really interesting. A way that I would start to look at that, we can look at the tropes of a traditional fantasy, like what sort of world issue would he be solving, or tasked with solving. Like, that's a really good underdog where it's like that's kind of like my definition of epic, where you take someone really regular and perhaps or underqualified, and you throw them into a situation that can affect the world, and they have to now kind of save the world, right? So what in this world, what kind of crazy circumstances are coming up that he has to say, that he has to stop? And then that would probably be then when I start to really drill in on, okay, specifically, how does he use this power? Specifically, what is he controlling? And trying to find interesting ways that we can kind of bend and extend those rules. Can he learn some additional skills that could supplement that, or at least within his crew? Because, like, listen, maybe he can summon a devastating river of chocolate like Willy Wonka, and it just floods the whole place, right? Maybe it could be like he can summon huge candy bars, so it ends up being like a huge boulder that he can crush things with. I mean, we're kind of getting outside of the fun of it being chocolate that he's conjuring. Can he imbue the chocolate with life? If he comes across a magic user who's able to bring things to life, like automatons, can we have like a living chocolate blob or whatever? Almost, it would kind of probably be like Frosty the Snowman when it gets too hot, the chocolate blob or creature person thing, golem, the chocolate golem. Can he create chocolate golems? Like, that's cool, right? So, and that's if you're kind of going a more traditional fantasy route, but I would probably really look deeply into or research and make decisions around what specifically is he controlling? What is the root of the magic that allows him to conjure? Would it allow him to conjure chocolate, and could that be applied to other things as well? What sort of chocolate could he conjure that could have a more offensive or defensive use if we're going on a more traditional fantasy situation? And the lie could still be that his magic is useless. That's the quickest one off the top. Now, I would have to probably sit with this author and kind of really, what do you want for this character? Tell me about the character's backstory so we can really pull on the depths of what the lie or misbelief he may have. What kind of story do you want to tell? All of that kind of stuff. But this is just some kind of possible directions off the top of the dome that this writer could go. Well, what do you think? What do you think? How would you, girl, this mucus will not let me be great. It won't let me be great. Okay. But we persevere. What would you do? Let me know in the comments. I'm very interested. Like, where would you take this story? Would you want it to be a cozy fantasy? What other genre would you put it in that could be kind of fun, or would you want it to be a more traditional fantasy type of thing? What lie would you give? What misbelief would you give this character? What sort of adventures would you send them on? I am very, very interested. Let's be kind and respectful in the comments, because we're best friends, and best friends treat each other with respect and kindness, right? Don't we? Okay. We don't have to agree, but we can disagree respectfully, tactfully, kindly, so that we can still be best friends at the end. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this this audio visual episode of the podcast. And I will see you next time. Is that cheesy to see you next time?